Today, we have a new study deep dive. Creatine monohydrate is the single most effective ergogenic supplement on the market. Some people say, well, that's just water. That's not actual real muscle tissue. You have to understand the two are synonymous. It also improves strength. It improves power output and sprint speed. There's other evidence it may improve immune function, cardiovascular health. But now what we're also finding is that creatine has benefits for cognitive health. Welcome back to the Dr. Layne Norton Podcast. I'm your host, Layne Norton, and today we have a new study deep dive. Now, I'm really excited about this study because it was looking at the safety of creatine. But before we get into it, we have to discuss one big issue, and that is it creatine or creatine, bro? So, just as a funny aside, people say it both ways. Scientists say it both ways. There's not a wrong way to say it. And as those biochemistry folks out there know, we love to name and pronounce things with multiple different ways. That's why every chemical has like 5 names for it. So both ways are acceptable. You will hear me call it creatine and you will hear me call it creatinine, and both are fine. So don't be confused. It's the same thing we're talking about. I use the two interchangeably. I know it's weird, but we're going to roll with it. So this new study is very cool because it was a meta-analysis of many human randomized control trials. And the title of it is Safety of Creatine Supplementation, Analysis of the Prevalence of Reported Side Effects in Clinical Trials and Adverse Event Reports. So basically, they tried to find any clinical trial where creatine was given as a supplement and where there were any sort of adverse effect reporting. And they compiled these all together to try and figure out, is creatine safe? Are there side effects that can be attributable to creatine supplementation? And I can remember getting creatine at 16 years old from GNC, and now I'm dating myself, and this was 1998. So I'm really dating myself now. And brought it home, and my parents were concerned that I was on steroids. For those parents watching out there, or for people who've never used creatine, it is not a steroid. It is a molecule your body produces naturally, which I guess you could say testosterone is too, but it's simply an amino acid derivative. So creatine is naturally occurring amino acid derivative that's synthesized endogenously, I want to say in the liver, from arginine, glycine, and methionine. And it's involved in the production of energy. It has many functions, but it's involved in energy production. You see, your main energy currency of your body is a molecule called adenosine triphosphate. So it's an adenosine molecule with 3 phosphates attached. And for lack of a better term, those 3 phosphates create a lot of energy, okay? And the cleaving of one of those phosphates is what's considered a very energetically favorable reaction. So this molecule is, I don't want to say unstable, but it wants to get rid of that phosphate. And when it does, it releases a lot of energy. And that energy is used to power some reactions in the body. In fact, pretty much all reactions in the body. I don't want to say all, but most are powered by ATP. And ATP is synthesized by taking adenosine diphosphate with 2 phosphates and adding a phosphate molecule to it to make ATP. And that can be done through the process of oxidative phosphorylation. It can also be done using kind of molecules to resynthesize ATP, and creatine phosphate, which once you get creatine in the body, it's converted to creatine phosphate. Creatine phosphate can donate its phosphate ion to ADP to reform ATP. And so that is originally how creatine was studied, because they were looking at it as a high energy phosphate donor to replenish ATP, because ATP is used when you're doing work, when you're exercising. And so if you have a reduction in ATP and intercellular ATP, you could run out of energy. So originally it was thought, well, creatine could help with this and maybe like anaerobic, high energy exercise. And it does. Anaerobic, high energy exercise, creatine does help with performance. And your body does make its own creatine phosphate. And you get it from meat intake. In fact, a lot of carnivore advocates have said, well, why do you need to supplement with creatine? You could just eat meat. That's true. But when you consider, I think there's about 1 gram of creatine per pound of like beef, for example. And then when you consider that cooking reduces the bioavailability by about 50%, you need to eat like a lot of meat to maximize your creatine stores. And typically, endogenous production is not sufficient to maximize intracellular phosphocreatine levels. Creatine phosphate can also be called phosphocreatine. So I'll use those two interchangeably as well. So just your own endogenous production typically is enough to saturate your muscle cells with phosphocreatine. Now, there are non-responders to creatine supplementation, and those people actually tend to be people whose muscular creatine phosphate levels are already saturated from endogenous production. So for whatever reason, these people produce more creatine phosphate. So if you take creatine as a supplement and it doesn't do anything, well, good for you. You were already getting the max anyway. Now that said, an easy way to maximize your phosphocreatine stores is to supplement with creatine. And supplementation with a dose of about 0.03 to 0.06 grams per kilogram of body weight per day has been shown to maximize phosphocreatine stores. So that's anywhere from like 3 to 6 grams of creatine a day for somebody like me. It is, in my opinion, the single most effective ergogenic supplement on the market. There is a reason it has been popular for 30 plus years. And that is because creatine monohydrate is the single most effective ergogenic supplement on the market. But why? Well, creatine has been shown to increase lean mass. And part of that is because creatine is an osmolyte. And as you saturate intramuscular creatine cells, that pulls water into the cell. Now, some people say, well, that's just water. That's not actual real muscle tissue. You have to understand the two are synonymous. A hydrated muscle cell is a larger muscle cell. It appears visually larger because a muscle cell is a fiber. So one muscle fiber is a muscle cell. If you can put more water into it, it looks more volumized. That's a bigger muscle. It doesn't matter if it's water or actual fibrous tissue. It's still more muscle. Now, there's also evidence that creatine does other things that help improve muscle mass. It may help with satellite cell fusion. It may help with synthesis of new muscle tissue. So there is evidence it has benefits outside of just pulling water into muscle on muscle size. But even if it only did that, again, a hydrated cell is an anabolic cell. It appears visually larger, and the hydration of a muscle cell may actually improve muscle protein synthesis. So creatine increases lean mass. Now, it's not a massive amount. You know, you're talking in best at research studies, a couple kilograms. But it's cheap, effective, and as this study showed, safe. So it's a pretty easy way to get some extra lean mass. It also improves strength. So 1 rep max strength goes up with creatine supplementation compared to placebo. It improves power output and sprint speed. So again, anaerobic exercise, creatine, great supplement for that. But now what we're also finding is that creatine has benefits for cognitive health. So creatine supplementation has been shown to improve cognition, and that involves attention time, processing speed, and memory. Creatine has been shown to improve those things. It also has been shown to improve symptoms of depression and anxiety. And really interestingly, there's some pilot and preliminary data that suggests it may protect against traumatic brain injury, severity of concussions, and may improve recovery from concussions. There's other evidence it may improve immune function, cardiovascular health, and brain health. So as we're finding these new benefits to exercise and resistance training, which, resistance training we know increases lean mass, increases strength, improves cardiovascular health, insulin sensitivity, all these sorts of things, but also cognition. And creatine tends to track with the research literature on the things that improve with resistance training. So creatine, just based on the stuff it does, how little it costs, how effective it is, I can't really think of a good reason for people not to supplement with creatine, to be quite honest, for what you get for how much it costs. Many people ask me what supplements I take, and that's easy. I take the supplements that I formulate and created for my supplement line, Outwork Nutrition. You see, I started Outwork Nutrition because I was frustrated by the lack of transparency in the supplement industry. So many companies were using proprietary blends to hide the fact that they were drastically underdosing their products. And as a research nutrition scientist, I know what having a proper dosage means when it comes to these ingredients. And I knew that many of these companies were just ripping people off. That's when I decided to create my own line of science-based supplements that were good enough to support my training. As someone who has won 5 national titles and 2 world titles in powerlifting and set 2 world records in powerlifting and trains for 2 to 3 hours a day, I needed supplements that would support my hard, intense training and recovery. All Outwork Nutrition products are based on the latest scientific evidence, and every ingredient is included at the proper clinical dose for maximum effectiveness. We provide links to all the scientific research and ingredients and claims on our website, so you don't have to take our word for it. You can read it for yourself. No proprietary blends, no BS marketing hype, no empty promises. Just science-backed supplements to support your hard work. Click the link in the show notes or head on over to outworknutrition.com and sign up for our email list to get 10% off your first order. And if we examine total creatine intake from diet and supplements, there's some interesting associations there. Now, again, this isn't randomized control trial data. We're looking at like cohort and cross-sectional epidemiology data, but some interesting things emerge here. Lower than recommended creatine intake in children of less than 1.5 grams per day is associated with lower weights, less lean mass, shorter height, less bone mineral content, and higher fat mass than kids who consume more creatine. Women over the age of 12 who consume low amounts of creatine, less than 13 milligrams per kilogram per day, have an increased risk of fetal complications like macrosomia, infections, hysterectomy, oophorectomy, and receiving hormone replacement therapy. And those who consumed higher amounts of creatine had lower risk of like irregular periods and pelvic pathology. Now, in other populations like older adults, low creatine intake of like under like a gram per day was associated with poor cognitive function, increased risk of angina pectoris, and liver problems. In adults, low creatine intake is associated with increased risk of cancer incidence and depression. Now, again, we have to be careful from drawing conclusions from these because this is cross-sectional or cohort data where it's possible that creatine intake may just be a marker of overall healthy lifestyle. But it's interesting nonetheless. And it certainly suggests that creatine may have far-reaching implications in terms of how much you get per day. This is why, based on this data, I say that creatine is on my Mount Rushmore of supplements. And it's probably the George Washington of Mount Rushmore for supplements. It is the most effective supplement on the market, in my opinion. And I don't really think second place is close. It's been around for, I think, 4 decades now as a supplement. And it has never gone out of style because it works. But from the time it was released, questions about its safety emerged. I have heard things such as it causes liver problems, it causes kidney problems, causes your hair to fall out. It's bad for women. It'll cause birth complications. It's bad for kids. It'll make you grow a third arm. It causes diarrhea. It will cause cramping. It causes you to retain water. It'll make you bloated. I hear that stuff all the time. So there's all these questions around safety because it is so popular. And I remember when I was in college, I think this was around 2001 or 2002, the NCAA actually banned colleges or universities from providing creatine to their athletes. So the athletes, they didn't ban it as a supplement. You could still take it as an athlete, but colleges could not provide it to their athletes. And I remember I had to write like a persuasion article as part of my writing portfolio for my college. We didn't have dedicated writing classes. You just have to provide this portfolio. And my persuasive writing piece I included was on the safety of creatine and why this ban made no sense and was based on no data. So this study was attempting to compile pretty much every clinical trial where they reported any kind of side effects with creatine and compare the frequency and incidence of those to placebo. Now, the importance of placebo is if you just take people and you have one group get creatine and one group gets nothing, the group getting creatine knows they're getting something, and psychosomatically may report a higher incidence of, oh, I took this thing and I've got a tummy ache now. It must be that. People tend to ascribe anything that happens while they're supplementing with a new supplement to the supplement, as opposed to some other change they might have made. This study was going to look at the presence of reported side effects in those trials involving creatine supplementation, how frequently those side effects came up, and how frequently they were in the group getting creatine versus the group getting placebo. So the reason you give a placebo is so both groups know they're getting something. They don't know which they're getting. They could be getting placebo, they could be getting creatine, and that takes away the power of suggestion, which in research studies, the placebo effect in some cases is just as powerful as pharmaceutical drugs. If your mind believes it will work, it can work. In fact, there was a research study where they told people they gave them steroids and they saw these people have better gains than people who were told they didn't get steroids, even though both were doing the same training program, both were eating the same kind of diet. Neither group got steroids, but the group that was told they got steroids had better gains. It's pretty wild stuff. So that's why it's important to have a placebo. They also looked at the presence of adverse event reporting in this trial because those are reported, I think, to the government or an international body. I'm not quite sure about that, but they get reported somewhere. And the side effects reported in the trials compared to claims made about creatine on the internet. In a meta-analysis, they're compiling data from other studies. So what really makes or breaks a meta-analysis is what the inclusion criteria are. Because you don't just want to bring every study in that's ever been done on creatine. You only want to bring them in that have the relevant stuff that you want to look at. They included any trial that included creatine supplementation, any trial that also had a placebo compared to creatine. So even the trials that didn't have placebo and they just gave creatine, they still looked at the reported side effects. So there was 685 trials that they included where creatine was given. There was 652 of those that also gave a placebo. So the vast majority had a placebo. There was only 33 trials that didn't. The researchers then created a data table including any reported side effects from these trials, and the table separated these side effects reported for creatine and side effects reported for placebo. And they also reported the frequency of these side effects, how often they were occurring in people getting creatine versus placebo. They reported the number of adverse events reports, the AERs. And then, like I said, they did a internet search where they performed a sentiment analysis, basically like what is the sentiment around these topics? What do people think of these topics? Using an analysis of online comments from YouTube and X social media platforms to determine what the overall sentiment was about some of these things. So side effects, effectiveness, they basically wanted to get an idea of like, what do people think of creatine and how does that match up with the actual data? So they included a lot of studies, 685 total. And I believe the overall number of subjects was like 26,000, over 26,000. About half got creatine, about half got placebo. So I think placebo was like 12,000 something and creatine was 13,000 something. So in terms of studies, the average study had 20 participants. They were on average 30 years old, but there was a big range. And they were on average 75 kilos body weight, which is the average body weight, and ingested creatine for 65 days on average at 0.17 grams per kilogram per day, or about 12.5 grams per day on average. Just to give you an idea of the range, the longest study was 14 years long. The oldest population was 77. The study with the most participants had 874. And overall, there were 35 side effects reported. So in all the studies, compiling all the different side effects. The total number that was reported was 35. So the potential of creatine side effects is 35. That's the max potential. But then they've got to look at that compared to placebo. So what was the overall incidence of side effects from creatine supplementation compared to placebo? Drum roll, please. 13.2% of subjects who took placebo reported having side effects, whereas 13.7% of subjects taking creatine reported side effects. And there was no statistical difference between those two. So basically, placebo group reported side effects as often as creatine. But what about individual side effects? Because this is just looking at all the 35 side effects that were reported. Overall, they didn't come up more frequently, but what if one side effect was statistically different from creatine supplementation in the study? So there were two side effects that were reported more frequently in the creatine supplemented group versus the placebo group. And that was GI distress, which is 4.9% in supplement groups versus 4.3% in the placebo group. So that, I guess, reached statistical difference. And muscle cramps, 2.9% in supplement group versus 0.9% in placebo group. However, when the number of participants reporting side effects was considered from all the studies, there were no significant differences observed in the frequency of GI issues or the other side effects. So I didn't quite understand this part of the paper because I'm not sure why they didn't consider it from all studies. I'm guessing perhaps they mean the papers that specifically pointed these out versus all the papers. What I mean by that is, okay, you've got a significant difference. Perhaps they're only looking at the studies where these particular side effects were reported. In those, there was a statistical difference. But if you include all the numbers, and maybe there were some studies where GI and muscle cramps weren't reported at all. If you consider all those studies, now the significant difference gets washed out. So I guess you could argue, all right, maybe it causes muscle cramps. Maybe it has some gastrointestinal problems. I wouldn't consider a 2% difference a big difference. I wouldn't consider a 0.6% difference a big difference. I'm surprised it reached statistical difference. So yeah, I'm not really worried about it. I kind of doubt those are actually from creatine. In fact, again, creatine makes your muscle cell more hydrated. If hydration is an indicator of muscle cramps, I'm not sure why creatine would cause that, especially when you consider it's hydrating the muscle cell and increases total body water. I don't see how it would cause cramps. Now, creatine may be a gut irritant. That is possible. A lot of people have sensitivities to various different things in the diet. It's totally plausible creatine could be a gut irritant, but literally anything can be a gut irritant. You can be sensitive to anything, to be quite honest. So I don't think that's unique to creatine. But here's the big one. No differences in reported side effects from kidney or liver. And they also, in the studies that looked at liver and kidney function and markers of liver and kidney health, no difference between creatine and placebo. So we can take the idea that creatine hurts your kidneys, hurts your liver. We can take that and we could just dump that right in the bin because that is complete BS. It does not do that. Creatine does not harm healthy kidneys or healthy liver. It does not. So for the other 33 side effects, there was no difference in the frequency of those reported side effects between placebo and creatine. And those side effects included the following: vertigo, hypertension, headache, dizziness, lightheadedness, nausea, diarrhea, impaired concentration, sleep disturbances, poor appetite, fatigue, excessive sweating, edema, palpitations, thromboembolic events, kidney-related issues, elevated liver enzymes, pregnancy, and other complaints. I like how pregnancy is thrown in there as a side effect. Imagine you just start taking creatine, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, look at that, we got pregnant. Talking about getting more than you bargained for. That's one way to increase your lean mass. Now, what's really cool is there was one data set in particular that had an 8-year clinical trial in Parkinson's patients that were getting 10 grams of creatine per day. 8 years of 10 grams of creatine per day. And they looked at things like neoplasm, nerve and muscle complaints, nervous system issues, infections and infestations, renal and urinary issues, psychiatric disorders, respiratory complaints, vascular issues, bone and joint problems, and metabolic and nutrition issues, skin complications, cardiac conditions, eye disorders, and reproductive issues. So long period of time supplementing, high dose, looked at all these things, and there were no significant differences between placebo and creatine supplementation. They also did sub-analyses where they separated the results into groups based on sex, age, healthy people versus like people who weren't healthy or in a clinical setting, and they still saw no difference. And when they looked at adverse event reports, there were 203 reported out of 28.4 million total AERs reported to the database. So creatine has very, very low frequency of even reports of side effects compared to overall. And when they looked at the sentiment analysis, the overall online sentiment was actually more positive than negative for creatine supplementation. Now, interestingly, creatine monohydrate was positive and other forms of creatine were negative, which makes me very happy because, as I will discuss in a little bit, if you are supplementing with a form of creatine other than creatine monohydrate, you are getting scammed. But more on that later. Hey guys, Layne here. And if you listen to my podcast, you probably love my research breakdowns. I don't put in a bunch of unnecessary fluff and scientific mumbo jumbo. I just give you the straight facts, but keep the nuance. And so if you love my research breakdowns, you'll love my research review reps. Research explained with practical summaries. Every month, my team of experts breaks down 5 studies in nutrition and fitness in a way that is palatable and easy to understand, even if you don't have a scientific degree. We tell you what the researchers tested, how they tested it, what they found, and what it means for you. And if we disagree with the researchers' conclusions based on their own data, we'll also tell you that. There's no BS, there's no fluff. We give you the straight facts. So if you're looking to up-level your brain and body gains, click the link in the show notes. Now, I know people will say, well, what about hair growth? They didn't look at hair loss. That's the one that keeps coming back up. And the fact that this really, I very rarely call studies bad, and it's not that it was a bad study. It's just the takes on it are so terrible for what it was. So it wasn't a bad study. It's just people like gave it way too much power. So like a study of a few people, a few rugby players who supplemented with creatine for like a couple of weeks, and they didn't even look at hair growth or hair loss. They just looked at DHT levels and found that they went up. But the precursor to DHT didn't show any difference. It didn't make sense. The data didn't make sense. They had no viable mechanism for how this occurred. And more recently, there actually was a multi-month trial where they measured not just DHT, they measured testosterone, free testosterone, and they looked at actual hair growth. And guess what they found? No difference between the creatine supplemented group and the placebo group. So again, we can take this idea that creatine causes hair loss, we can move it over and we can just dump it in the bin. I mean, just look at my luscious hair. And I've been supplementing with creatine for over 20 years, almost 25 years. Actually, yes, 25 years. I've been supplementing with creatine for over 25 years. And look at my hair. Just kidding. I know some people will say I have like a 5 head. Kind of always had that. My hairline's gone back a little bit over the last few years, but for the most part, for 43 years old, I think I'm doing okay. So I don't think creatine has harmed my hair. So there, everyone, there's your anecdote. And then also the data, that pesky data, just does not back up creatine causing hair loss. Sorry. Blame your parents for those problems, not creatine. So, I mean, again, the take home from this is that creatine is effective. It is safe. Despite decades of concern about safety, it is overwhelmingly safe. Like, I don't know that you can find another compound in existence that basically had 26,000 subjects over decades of research in hundreds of clinical trials. And the takeaway was, yeah, there was actually no side effects. Like, that's crazy. You go into Walgreens and buy any sort of over-the-counter medication. I promise you, there's way more side effects than creatine, which has none, apparently, or at least none that they found. So this is overwhelmingly the most effective, safest supplement on the market, and it is inexpensive. Now, I know people will say, it's this much, it's that much. Consider what you're getting. Consider getting something that increases lean mass, strength, power, exercise performance, cognition, metabolic health. Would anybody be interested in those things? I mean, sign me up, Now, again, COI, conflict of interest, yes. I have a product that contains creatine right back here, recovery. I don't know if you can see it on the camera angle. So my recovery product from Outwork Nutrition has creatine monohydrate in it. And yes, I sell a product with creatine in it. So yes, I have a conflict of interest. But I've used creatine for over 25 years, well before I got paid for it. I have paid for it for many, many years and believe in it as a supplement because it works. It very clearly works. And if you don't get results from it, it's because you're already saturated with creatine phosphate in your muscle cells. So good for you. Now, we need to address the type of creatine. So the vast majority of these research studies run something called creatine monohydrate, which is the most studied form of creatine and the most effective. There are other forms of creatine out there. Now, creatine monohydrate has been shown to saturate the muscle cell 100% with creatine. You cannot get better than 100%. And yet, other forms of creatine come out every few years. Back in the day, I remember it was creatine pyruvate, and then it was creatine ethyl ester, and then it was buffered creatine, like Crealkaline brand name. More recently, there is creatine HCl. They all claim that they give better results with less side effects. Well, first off, there are no side effects apparently, so that was a lie. Are you sure about that? And then, secondly, in terms of effectiveness, there are none, zero, zilch, nada, goose egg, zero. Listen to the words that are coming out of my mouth. Zero studies demonstrating that there is a more effective form of creatine than creatine monohydrate. In fact, the studies on other forms of creatine show them at best to be just as effective as creatine monohydrate, and several are worse. In fact, creatine ethyl ester increased phosphocreatine levels less than creatine monohydrate, even though it costs like 4 times more. Buffered creatine, this idea that you need to buffer your creatine because it has to survive stomach acid. Well, I guess they didn't take chemistry because creatine is actually stable in stomach acid. You don't need to buffer it. Now, buffered creatine has been shown to be as effective as creatine monohydrate for getting the results that you want, but you'll pay 2 to 4 times as much. So, I mean, if you like wasting money, I guess, cool. Creatine HCl, same deal. Now, people were saying, well, creatine HCl is more soluble. That means if it's more soluble, it's going to be better absorbed and you'll get more into circulation. So maybe, and the kind of hand-waving argument was, well, maybe it'll be better, but even then, you could supplement with less and get the same results. And yet they've done those studies and they have shown that creatine monohydrate is just as good as creatine HCl at the same dose. And, oh, by the way, you'll pay 2 to 4 times as much for creatine HCl. But why do these companies come out with these other forms of creatine if creatine monohydrate saturates the muscle cell 100%, is the most studied form and most effective? Well, the answer to your question is money, money, and money. Because since creatine monohydrate is so widespread, it drives the price down because every company sells it. It's hard to mark up creatine monohydrate. It's not sexy. It's been around for 40 plus years, right? So supplement companies aren't making big money off this. They're making like literally pennies on each container because it is so ubiquitous. It drives down the price. It's kind of like, I remember when I bought my first flat screen TV. This is I bought an LCD screen TV. I want to say in like 2008 or 2009. It was a 42 inch and it cost me like over $1,000. And now you can get a 42-inch screen LED TV, way better resolution for like a pack of bubblegum. I'm hyperbole, obviously, but still, like, it is very cheap, few $100. And that is because they are so widespread. So many companies make them, it drives down the price. So companies try to reinvent the wheel to convince you that you need their special form of creatine because it's better than creatine monohydrate. That way they can justify charging you 2 to 4 times as much and they can put more money in their pocket. And then once I show the research, when I've debated with these people, when I show them, they go, well, there's less side effects with our buffered form of creatine. That's one of the big ones. Buffered creatine doesn't cause water retention. Well, please explain this to me, because the water retention, the hydration of the muscle cell, is probably one of the most anabolic properties of creatine. So if you're saying that your creatine doesn't cause water retention, you're also saying that your creatine is not as anabolic as other forms of creatine. Which is it? Because you can't have both. Let me know. And oh, by the way, the water retention from creatine is inside the muscle cell. It doesn't change the distribution of body water. You just have more. So it's not going to make you look bloated. It's not going to make you feel bloated. Now, if you're somebody who has a GI sensitivity to creatine, and some people do report this, even though in the studies, like, it wasn't more frequent than placebo when they considered all the studies, I can totally see where some people have a sensitivity to creatine. I can see that. People have sensitivity to lots of things. And if you have GI issues with creatine supplementation, what I recommend is you split it into smaller doses throughout the day. Because if you do that, it's less of the dosage at one time. Your GI will be able to tolerate it better. But it doesn't make you have edema or swelling or bloated or anything like that. It's not going to make you retain water, other than like where you want it, inside the muscle cell. Again, as you can tell, huge fan of creatine. I think there really is no good argument to not be using it when you consider how little it costs, the wide range of benefits, and how safe it is. People ask me all the time, like, well, would you be comfortable with your kids taking it? Yes. Yes. And I probably will start supplementing them with it now that this research has come out. I felt very comfortable before, but now I feel very, very comfortable. And especially for the cognitive benefits, I think it might be great for kids. Now, I'm not telling you to put your kid on creatine. I'm not saying you should put your kid on creatine, but it appears to be very safe and very effective. And one of the things I do when I'm evaluating a hierarchy of evidence is one of the things that sticks out to me in terms of like, how good do I think the evidence is on something, is how consistent is the evidence. And the research on creatine is so consistent. Thousands of research studies across hundreds of different labs in dozens of countries over decades in all different types of populations: men, women, kids, adults, elderly, healthy populations, sick populations, people with cognitive problems. It has such a wide range of consistent benefits regardless of the population used. And that is a very good indicator that something is actually legit and effective. When you see that wide breadth of research in different populations across different labs over a long period of time. For any supplement, you can find a rodent study or some short-term human study or like isolated studies that will show benefits. But when you have this much data over this long of a period of time in this many populations done in these many labs, you can be very, very confident that this is legit. Now, so what do I recommend for creatine? Well, I recommend creatine monohydrate. Supplement 3 to 5 grams a day, 3 to 6 grams a day, whatever you want. Some people have proposed that maybe 10, 20 grams per day has more cognitive benefits. I'm not sure the research really shows that yet, but if you want to use more, it's safe. But 5 grams of creatine monohydrate per day has been shown that over the course of a month will saturate your muscle cells with phosphocreatine. So that is what I recommend. That is what I do. And that is what is in my recovery product, is 5 grams of creatine monohydrate. So whether you buy my recovery product or you get it from some other reputable supplement company, make sure they do independent third-party lab testing so you can make sure what you think you're getting is what you're actually getting. So GMP certified, third-party tested, that's what you want. I cannot recommend creatine supplementation enough. Again, effective, safe, inexpensive. the trifecta of a great supplement. Creatine is the GOAT of nutritional supplements. Hope you guys enjoyed this breakdown. And as always, you can find my citations and my show notes that are available for all of you online on my website. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and I will catch you on the next podcast. Later, guys.